funny, boys. So, about to play some music. This is gonna be funny. It's Indian Lil Nas X Panini. Okay, I can't do this anymore.
It's not even morning, I got breakfast on my mind. I need a number 2, a number 4, 2 number 9s. And can you add a sausage, egg, and cheese with hash brown on the side? My love partner wanna onion, please say he don't want ice. And I put some grape jelly in the bag, that would be nice. And I think I want some hot cakes, can you make it 4 or 5? Can I add a chicken biscuit, make sure that it's freshly fried? If people, can you ask them what they put up in that price? Your ice cream machine working for I really lose my mind. Is it really broken? Cause I feel like y'all be lying. And I hope you got my order, cause you only get one time. So please don't get it wrong though. Damn!
Well, I lived for years feeling this way. Years of wishing for the ability to connect, to express, to share with others. Maybe you're wondering about the reason? Well, it was that I fell off the tree. I was my mom and dad's only child. We were a middle-class family, and we lived in a small house with a stunning backyard, which had an old oak tree that was said to be even older than my grandparents. When my dad first bought the house, he found a treehouse in the oak tree built by the kids who had lived in the house before us. After a lot of convincing, my father agreed to fix the treehouse. He even made a wooden ladder so I could climb into the tree easily. I remember helping my dad decorate its walls with posters and photos of my favorite band. For a second, you might be thinking, what a sweet family. But no, this wasn't the case exactly. You see, my mom was a moody woman who yelled a lot, and nothing me or my dad did could please her. She would spend the whole night smoking cigarettes in front of the TV and then sleep the whole day. As for my dad, he spent his time working so he could pay the bills and buy us food. And me, well, after I got home from school, there was nothing for me to do but go to my uncle's treehouse. For my 13th birthday, my dad bought me the best gift ever. He bought me a little white puppy that was super fluffy. I called him Snowball. Perhaps this dog would keep me company so I wouldn't be so alone. I loved Snowball, and I taught him lots of tricks. We used to spend all day together in the treehouse. We would only go home to eat dinner. That way, we steered clear of my mom's yelling and her long fights with my dad. I watched the sky a lot during my days in the treehouse. Back then, my dad only came home after the sun had set, so I'd watch the stars lighting up the sky. They looked amazing. I knew that those stars were nothing but meteors traveling fast through the sky as they burned, but everything my dad told me about them made them seem magical. One time, I was watching the sky with Snowball, waiting for my dad to return home. When he arrived, he climbed up and sat beside me. He said, "This falling star is a wish that just came true for someone out there in the world." "A wish?" I said. He explained a long, long time ago there was a poor man praying to the gods every day. However, the gods were always busy, so they didn't answer him. One day he screamed so loudly the mountains shook. The gods looked at him and listened to his troubles. They became so sad and cried burning stars. So this way, whenever he saw a falling star in the sky, he'd make a wish and the gods would make them come true. "But can this be possible?" I asked. And he replied, "Legends are a beautiful thing to hear, but not to believe. If the legends are so old, how can we know if they are true or not?" I asked. He just smiled at me and said it was time to head back to the house. On that same night, while I was lying in bed hugging Snowball, it started to feel like my
So-
life was falling apart. My mom was screaming hysterically at my dad, telling him that the money he was bringing in was no longer enough and that he should start searching for an extra job. She said that she could no longer go out with her friends because she was so embarrassed. She couldn't afford to buy new dresses every time they went out like her friends did. I saw Snowball looking at me as if he wanted to say, "What a silly woman." The fighting and loud screaming continued for a long time until I could no longer bear it. I snuck out of the window and headed towards the dark oak tree in the backyard. Everything around me was dark. Behind me walked Snowball. We walked very quietly so no one would hear us, and then we arrived at the treehouse. It was pitch black, so I missed a step on the ladder, and then my leg slipped. The last thing I remembered from that day was that after I fell hard on the ground, everything around me turned fuzzy. Snowball sounded far away, even though I could see him jumping around me. Then I wasn't able to feel anything. After a little while, I felt myself waking up. My head hurt and I couldn't feel any part of my body. I'd completely lost control over my body parts. Even my eyes, I couldn't open them. I could feel the light around me, but it was too difficult to open my eyes. Oh my, what happened to me? Was I stuck in my sleep, or was it worse than that? Had I died?
PS4 players, my Epic is slow for 487. Xbox players, you can just have your Xbox. I don't really care that much. Highlander 0507, as you can see.
Suddenly I heard
On
something. If I
Xbox,
was able to hear him, that means I wasn't dead. Thank God. From his tone of voice, I gathered he was a doctor speaking to my parents. He said, "The damage she suffered to her head due to the fall has resulted in severe internal bleeding in her brain, which is preventing enough oxygen from reaching her body, resulting in a coma." But I wasn't in a coma. I was there, with them. I heard my dad crying and my mom inquiring about the treatment fees. I wanted to scream, to call out for them, to say something, anything. But I wasn't able to even talk at that time. Suddenly, I was just a vegetable, unable to do anything but listen. Most people don't think twice before talking or connecting with others. They do it automatically. But I had absolutely no way of speaking anyone for the last 13.
Aspen Dental said it's going to be no charge to you.
At Aspen Dental, we're all about yes to free exam and x-rays for new patients without insurance.
I'm not used to getting that type of service.
15 years, I had been a normal girl. A girl who loved her dad, her dog, and who loved to play. I was happy and healthy. But now, suddenly, that had all changed. The doctors didn't know what to do. They thought I was completely immobile, but they always treated me nicely. All the time I spent in the hospital, I only heard my dad's voice. My mom had completely vanished. I didn't know where she was, and I didn't hear anything related to her. Until the day the doctor said there is nothing more they can do, and that it is best to leave and turn to my parents. I heard my mom arguing with my dad. She didn't want me back home. I was, according to her, a burden that she didn't want to carry. But I went home anyway. I was happy because I was returning home. I heard my dad telling my mom that he finished the treehouse because that was the last thing I asked him to do. That's why he insisted on bringing me back home, so I could be near the things I loved. However, things went downhill from there. I lost my ability to move. I failed all the mind exams they conducted on me in the hospital, so the doctors told my parents they could treat me as if I didn't exist. My return home was just a hopeless attempt at keeping my unconscious body comfortable until I died. My dad tried his hardest to keep me comfortable, and that really annoyed my mom. Their friends stopped visiting after a while, and the money Dad was providing was no longer enough. Machines that were keeping me alive were too expensive. Before, I was able to escape my mom screaming and ranting, but today I was stuck with it without them even knowing that I could hear them. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. When my dad first got me Snowball, I thought that he was very smart and could just understand me without even having to talk to him. But my dad used to laugh and say, dogs are about as smart as a 3-year-old. They can feel when you're happy, sad, or scared, but they can't read your mind. Deep down, though, I knew Snowball was no ordinary dog. He was special enough to be able to read my thoughts because we had this insane bond. Every time my parents started their screaming matches, I'd hear Snowball sitting beside me and barking in a low voice, as if to tell me that everything would be all right. I was sure that Snowball knew I was a prisoner in my body, unlike what everyone else believed. He never left my side. His breathing was my only comfort. For a while, I used to be entertained by my father when he entered my room at night and started moving my body left and right to help my blood circulate. Once he was done, he'd sit beside me and talk with me for an hour or so about his day, like he used to before, but that didn't last too long. The last talk he had with me was about how tired he was, both physically and mentally, that he was very upset he'd lost his little girl, the only person in the whole world who used to listen to him. That day, I heard him sobbing so loudly. Then he suddenly said, I can no longer bear to look at you like this anymore. After that, he stopped talking to me altogether. A year quickly turned into 2, and I felt the person I used to be disappearing. Not just her body, but also her memories. My mom said that she'd had enough with my stuff taking up so much room, and that she could put the space to good use. My dad wasn't able to refuse, so he just said that he'd move my things to the treehouse. It wasn't long until I was moved out of my room to another one that was more practical and way smaller. It had barely enough room for my bed, machines, and for one person to be able to move around in. That was enough for me, according to my mom. What was worse was that this little room was next to the living room. That meant that I could hear everything. I mean, literally down to the tiniest details. 2 years turned to 3, and I was still in the same place with no one aware of my existence. It was like I was a ghost. Whenever my mom's friends came to visit, they used to...
At Aspen Dental, we're all about yes to free.
ignore me, as if I was just part of the furniture. I was dead to everyone, just not in the ground. Only Snowball remained at my side. My mom and her friends' conversations were ridiculous. They gossiped a lot and couldn't stop judging their relatives. Sometimes they talked about clothes, travel, and their husbands. I once heard my mom talking ill about my dad. She said he was the reason behind her unhappiness, and that she had met some rich guy at a coffee shop. That guy had invited her for a drink, and she'd gone to meet him. And now she was seriously considering leaving me and my dad. For me, that was the worst part about those 3 years. Feeling totally powerless and not being able to stand in front of her and not being able to scream, "You're an ungrateful woman. All the things Dad did for you, and yet it's never enough. Now you want to leave him because some other guy has more money?" My poor dad didn't deserve my mom, or even me. I found myself in utter darkness, and the darkness was swallowing my dad up whole. I couldn't remember much about my life before the fall. I was so terrified I'd forget everything. I remembered having a friend called Maisie, but I couldn't remember what we used to do or how we would spend time together. I remember loving science, but I no longer remembered anything. I had to find a way to stay here in this world, even if I had to create my own world inside my head. Maisie became my best friend. She always visited on Sundays. Creating new ones. Head consciousness was slowly born and got lost in my made-up thoughts. Suddenly, I could no longer tell the difference between what was real and what wasn't. There's a fine line that separates memory from until she dies. Imagine being in my position, not right without any response. She would yell in my dad's face, and he would answer, until she dies. Imagine got lost in my made-up thought. And I clearly overstepped it. But the one thing I was absolutely certain of was that the fights my parents had and my mom's betrayal were 100% real. After 4 years, my mom had had enough of me. How long must I endure moving this body left and right without any response? She would yell in my dad's face, and he would answer, until she dies. Imagine being in my position, not being able to speak to a friend, not feeling loved, any fear. And so that's how I spent those. My dad came home and Snowball continued to bark. Everyone went to bed and Snowball was still barking. It was just like me, wishing for someone to realize that I was still with them.
That brisket is.
But what happened was the opposite of what we hoped for. The next day, his barking stopped completely. I didn't know what had happened to him. Mom must have gotten rid of him. I was really worried about him. Snowball was my only friend, the only one that made me feel that I wasn't actually dead. He just disappeared. That day, I heard some heated discussion between my parents. You might say that nothing was new, but this time it was different. My mom decided to leave my dad. She accused him of having never been the perfect husband. She was crazy. He was the coolest dad a girl could ever wish for. He tried to persuade her to stay, but it was pointless. She screamed at the top of her voice. It would have been better if she died that day. It's like a curse that won't go away unless I leave. The sound of the door slamming was the last thing I heard. I was incapable of changing any of the things around me, or even the way my mom and dad looked at me. I was an invisible, silent watcher to how people acted when they thought no one was looking. Unfortunately, I wasn't just a watcher. Because of my inability to communicate with people, I became the perfect victim. A creature that looked like it was devoid of emotions. For 4 years, my mom used to abuse me mentally and physically. What did I ever do to her to deserve that? Part of me wanted to cry, and the other part wanted to fight. I was so full of pain and sadness. It was torture. The following day, it was like I no longer existed inside the house. My dad was really depressed. He moved me to a nursing home, exactly like I'd expected would happen. I felt worthless now without Snowball, and without people around me. I became even more of a shell of my former self. I used to figure out that the time from the nurse's changing shift was funny. Emotions welled up in me, and suddenly I could feel the familiar fluttering of my eyelids. I had to open my eyes. I couldn't stay like this anymore. My dad had his face buried in my shoulder, and he was. Perhaps emotions have more power than we realize. My dad's love for me made me open my eyes once again. The doctors ran some tests on me, and none of them could explain what had happened. They only said the damage that her head suffered was apparently able to heal with time. Your daughter is out of her coma. To make sure I was able to hear them, the doctor asked me to blink twice. And I did it! Being able to communicate again, even in a simple way, movement and closed my eyes and wished to be able to speak again. I mean, there must have been a reason for this.
That brisket is actually from Subway.
Hey, want to buy a
At
sweet?
Climax, they buy all the cars.
That's helpful.
Yes, it is.
Star to fall at that moment, right? It couldn't have been a coincidence. But even then, I didn't feel completely free. People around me were still controlling everything. When and what I ate, if I could stay in bed, or if I should be sitting on a chair. It didn't matter how many times I blinked, I couldn't say anything except for yes and no. One day, my dad came in all happy. He told me that the doctors had finally agreed to let him take me on a wheelchair around the city. It was the first time in so long that I get to move and finally leave my bed. I was scared. The outside world must have changed a lot. I didn't know if I should go, but I needed this. It was time to get back out there. I remember one moment from that day very vividly. My dad left me alone in the car on our way back in order to buy something quickly from the store. A woman passed by, looked at me, and smiled. I didn't know the reason behind her smile back then, and I'll never know. But that small smile, the small human interaction, made me feel better again. That woman's smile is what pushed me to continue. Seeing my dad come into my room was always the best moment of my day. However, I wasn't pleased when my dad entered my room with the press who came to listen to my story. Apparently, they decided that my story was worth being told and shared. The press ruined my peace and quiet. My mom even returned just so she could be in the spotlight. She returned after disappearing for so long, just for fame. The press did help a bit, though. My dad had them help us look for solutions and treatments that might help me get better. My mom, though, well, she didn't exactly show up because she suddenly remembered the importance of family. She was just there for fame. And Dad wanted me to decide if she could stay or not. Mom's answer was, "My dear daughter, do you want your mommy back in your life?" I blinked nonstop, and this meant I wanted her to know, because I knew she didn't care if I lived or died. My dad was a person who'd taken care of me my whole life. Of course, he had weak moments where he wasn't by my side, but at least he still loved me enough and thought of me all the time. And for me, that was enough. And guess what? My dad got in contact with one of the big companies that made medical devices. They had created a device that gets implanted inside the brain and is connected to a special computer. The device sends electric waves to the computer that then says the words out loud. That company heard about my condition in the media and were happy to help me. The first time they tried this on me was pretty funny. Everything I said made everyone laugh, but for me it was sad because I never got an answer to my question. What I asked was, what happened to my dog Snowball? My story might be sad. Some of you might believe it, and others will say that it is just the product of my imagination. But what can't be denied is that there are a lot of people like me in this world who no one knows anything about because they don't have the ability to connect with people. It wouldn't hurt to act nicely towards them and not to ignore them, because, like me, they have feelings too. My suffering lasted for 7 years, but I truly believe that the star that fell that night was the reason my wish of being able to talk again came true. Everything happens for a reason. Did you like my story? Don't forget to tell me what you think in the comments below, and to like and subscribe to the channel.
I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know I need someone.
At Fifth Third Bank, we're working hard to make banking a Fifth Third better.
What does that mean?
Let's say these nachos are your bank. Pretty standard.
That's my bank.
But with Fifth Third Bank, we put 100.
I was born Friday, November 28th, 2003, in a jail cell. My mom tried her hardest to get out earlier so she could raise me, but she wasn't able to leave, and in the end, my mom had to beg my grandmother to take me in. At first, my grandma was hesitant because she was already raising my 2 older brothers, but she knew my mom was desperate. Growing up, my grandma made sure that my brothers and I had everything we wanted. We had video games, delicious southern home cooking, a small house in the countryside, and lots of animals, like some chickens and a few dogs and a cat. I could tell that my grandma loved me and my oldest brother the most. She always made sure that we were well fed and loved, but I couldn't say the same for my second oldest brother, Jimmy. My grandma always treated Jimmy badly, and sometimes I would hear him crying at night. Jimmy became so angry that one day he decided to take it out on me. After that incident, I never forgave him, and even to this day, we still have our differences. But apart from Jimmy, everything else in my life wasn't too bad. I made the most of what I could in my situation. When I was about 11 years old, my grandma started to get really sick. She She would often be bedridden for days, and it got so bad that we decided that she needed to go to the doctors. She took me with her, and we went to the hospital so they could run some tests. After they were done, the doctor came in and told us that she had ovarian cancer. When I heard that, I started crying, but all my grandmother did was sigh and pull out a mint from her bag. She gave one to me and one to herself. On the way home, I asked her what this meant for our family, to which she replied, "I don't know, honey, but if it's time for me to go, then let the Lord take me and judge me." My grandma fought it for almost a year, doing everything from chemotherapy to CAT scans. I tried to focus on other things, like my new PS3 and school, but it was really hard. When we finally heard that she had beaten it, she did the same as when she was diagnosed. My grandma sat on her chair and pulled out a mint, gave one to me, and then to herself. For the next 2 years, everything was going well. It felt like we could finally be a family again, until one day. My siblings were on a band trip, which meant that I had to ride the school bus alone. When I got back to the house, I saw my Aunt Diane sitting on the front porch with my grandma. My grandma just looked at me and told me that she had gotten sick again, but this time, she had liver cancer. I fainted. After that day, my grandma just kept getting worse and worse. She could no longer clean or cook, and she was always sick. 2 months later, she was put on hospice, and all she could do was lay on the hospital bed. On Thanksgiving Day, we had a small dinner to celebrate my mom and my grandma coming home. My mom decided to stay with us so she could help take care of my grandmother and make sure she was okay. Eventually, we had to put a bedpan in because my grandma wasn't able to walk properly anymore. My school made cards for her, as well as a huge banner for us to hang in the living room. But a week before Christmas, my grandmother asked us to take it down. We took it down unwillingly, as the banner gave my mom and my siblings a small glimmer of hope that my grandma would get better. The day before Christmas Eve, my grandma's chihuahua started barking at the front door for no reason. I tried to get her to stop, but she kept barking and wagging her tail. An hour later, my grandma looked at me and said, "Robert's here. He pulled in on his Harley a while ago." My grandpa used to own a white Harley Davidson with purple wings painted on the side. Grandma even told me where he was standing and told me to wave and say hi. I waved while I choked back tears. I didn't have the heart to tell her that Grandpa had passed many years ago. A little while later, my mom walked in and saw me crying. She asked what was wrong. My grandma looked at her and said, "Your daddy's standing by the fireplace. He loves you, Jane." My mom was so overcome with tears that she ended up collapsing by the fireplace. After that night, my grandma's health deteriorated rapidly. She couldn't speak coherently anymore, and the day after Christmas, my grandmother passed away. A month after the funeral, my mom ran away, leaving my 2 brothers and me to fend for ourselves. I've never felt so alone. My brothers were old enough to live on their own, but I had to go stay with my uncle. He was a kind man and took great care of me. He made sure I had everything I needed and only ever asked me to do simple chores in return. During that time, a lot happened. I tried to be a good kid for my uncle, but I couldn't handle all the loss and started indulging in shoplifting, stealing cars, anything that would numb the pain that I felt. I met someone, and for a moment, I thought it would get better. But in the end, I ruined my girlfriend's life too. I was being an idiot and started speeding. I lost control of the car, and I tried to scream and reach out for my girlfriend's hand, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I ended up passing out, and when I woke up in the hospital, my uncle told me that she didn't make it. Because of me, all I could do to try to ease the pain was drink. My whole childhood, I always wondered about my dad, if he was even alive, or if he ever tried to look for me. Out of the blue, he contacted me on Facebook, and it felt like I had been given a second chance. My uncle couldn't handle my outbreaks anymore. After a year of living with my uncle, I asked to live with my dad. Living with my dad are some of the happiest moments of my life. He made me feel like I could have a family again. 2 months in, I came home and found him on the floor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and just ran. I ran as far away as I could. In the middle of the street, I fell to the ground and started questioning, why did this keep happening to me? What was going to happen to me? I tried to calm myself down, but all I kept thinking about was that everyone around me kept dying. This was all my fault. I later found out that my dad had diabetic complications. I am 15 years old now and currently live with my dad's parents. I've tried to forgive myself and my girlfriend, but every time I close my eyes, I still see her face. It's been really hard, but I'm trying to see the bright side. I feel lucky that my grandparents have given me a chance, and my therapist has helped a lot. I still don't know where my mom is, but I believe that everything will be okay. Eventually, and hopefully one day, I can tell her that I'm doing fine.
No. That's not how we play. Fuck mom. Fuck no. Don't run away. No. Don't play with that shit, bro. No, she don't love you. She gonna leave like that? Don't blow that, girl. Don't do that. That's my mother. Fuck you. Oh no, I got a disease walking around through your neighborhood. Fleas in there, like, what you got? And I'm like, "Gee." Oh no, I got like, what you got? And I'm like, guess you. Yippee. Like this.
The only thing I felt was my hollow body repeatedly being bashed to the ground. If I opened my eyes, he'd go straight for the face. If I moved a single part of my body, he'd beat harder. I messaged him and told him I forgot. But soon after, my now stepfather began showing a completely different side of him. At times, my stepfather was a loving, caring, and kind father, but other times, he was a monster. When the monster in him came out, he would show so much anger and rage that it wasn't long before he would beat my mother and me. When I was in second grade, we moved to the next town over, and my stepfather did not want anyone to visit us and told us to keep people out of our business. My mom and I were scared of him, so we would lie to everyone and pretend that everything was okay. It didn't take long until he started beating me. During those times, he'd do it to control and punish my mom. Even the most trivial things would irritate him and bring out the beast in him. One time, he threw the remote control at my face because I walked in front of the TV while he was watching. I had a black eye the next day and thought to myself, if I went to school like this, it would be the end of it. But I couldn't bring myself to do that. So I skipped school until the bruising around my eye was gone. Amongst all the dread and sadness, we did have one great thing that happened. My baby brother was born. It felt good to have some joy back in our life, and for a split time, everything was how it was supposed to be. But when my brother was a year old, for some unknown reason, my stepfather was enraged and was about to beat my brother, who was playing near him on the floor. I quickly yelled at him, so to shift his attention and rage towards me and to hit me instead. He did. One night the phone was turned off because my mom had forgotten to pay the phone bill. Again, in my stepfather's rage, he beat me brutally. I felt the dull thuds against my body and could hear the hits against my head as he continuously pounded my body against the floor. Every blow was painful. Every hit he made, I heard my body broke. The next day, I had open cuts and bruises all over my face and body, and I felt like I was run over by a truck. He told me not to go to school, but I went anyway. The principal saw me that day, and that was it. They called the police and Child Protective Services. They took me out of the home and sent me to my grandparents, who weren't too far. Yes, I didn't have a complete family again, but it was better than being scared to make the wrong move or live in fear. It was better than being beaten to the ground simply because I crossed his path. I thought the worst was over because of the problem to all of this. My stepfather was out of the picture. I thought I was saved, but they weren't. My mother and brother were living with that monster, and I didn't know how they were doing. I couldn't see or speak with them. I began having nightmares, crying every night, worrying about them. It took nearly 6 years for my mom to find the courage to leave him, and for me and my brother to be truly reunited. It didn't matter what image of the family was. I was only happy to be with them again. Still, I kept thinking about my stepfather, and I couldn't get him off my mind. I looked him up on Facebook when I was at work one day and randomly sent him a friend request. I can't say what made me do it, or why I did it, but it felt like something I should. I messaged him and told him I forgave him, not knowing if he'd reply. My anxiety shot up when I saw he had read the message, and instantly I had flashbacks and shadows of him hitting me all those years ago. The smallest things, like walking in front of him while he was watching TV, or the times I drew his attention away from my mom and brother and to me instead. I nearly had a panic attack until he messaged me back. He seemed very happy to read my message and replied with the kindest messages anyone could write. After speaking with him for a few days, I encouraged my younger brother to do the same so that he could get to know the other half of his family. During those messages, he had apologized for his past wrongs to us, and I learned that my stepfather had lost his mom, dad, and sister at the age of 4. And had been sent to live with relatives. Growing up, he only knew loss and had never felt love and warmth from anyone. And so I began to believe the nice in him was who he really wanted to be. And the monster that we experienced was something that had been created by unfortunate circumstance.
Oh no, I get a disease walking around through your neighborhood
Poison
spread.
had been removed from my body. My opinion became very important to my stepfather, and I think by doing it, it made him realize that these cycles could be broken, and that he didn't need to harbor all the pain he carried all these years. He would call
Oh
me
no,
and
I
talk to me
get
about
it.
his problems, and it sounds weird, but it felt good helping that man that once hurt me and my family so much. There are 2 lessons here. 1, if you are in a similar situation, tell someone right away. Keep telling until someone listens. 2, give forgiveness even if it feels impossible. I'm not saying you have to be friends with those who have wronged you, but if you can truly forgive them and let it go, it is the best thing you can do for your
Oh
mental and
no,
emotional
I got
well-being.
a disease
Anger,
walking around through your
resentment,
neighborhood.
hate are poison. By keeping that within us, it only poisons our souls, stopping us from enjoying the moments of life that deserve appreciation.
Yoink, 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 yoink. Oh shit, you're broken. Machine with the what's up, bro? Revive. Your neighborhood. Oh no, I got a disease walking round through your neighborhood, spreading all my feet. What you got in my morning? Dusty?
Hi everyone, my name is Ken, and I am the unluckiest person in the world. As a kid, I almost died twice because of my relatives. I come from a broken home. I only had my mom and my older sister Sam. We have a large age gap, 11 years, so I can't say we're very close. We don't have a dad. I suspect he just ran away from my mom. Sam did the same thing eventually. Mom is a very complicated person. She's extremely strict, and she only knows one method of parenting: physical punishments. She can get mad from the smallest things. For example, just because the shoes aren't put properly in the hallway. From the outside, our family looks fine, but it's not easy to live in such an environment. It was harder for my sister than for me. I'm smaller, weaker, and hitting me too hard could have consequences. So poor Sam suffered from it a lot more. She once left the bathroom door not fully closed, and when I accidentally came in, I was terrified with what I saw. Her whole back was covered with scars and bruises. And with all that, my sister managed to cover for me. When I messed up, she always took the blame and suffered for both of us. We had nowhere to go, because from the outside, everything looked fine. Our mom worked as an accountant in some firm with connections. If we had gone somewhere to talk about this, they would have rejected us. Sam tried once, but they didn't even let her talk. The same night, Mom explained to her why we shouldn't do this. When I went to school, Sam got married and vanished. She just one time to my room at night, kissed me goodbye, and in the morning she disappeared with all of her stuff. Mom cried so hard. I jumped out the window, though we lived on the second floor, used pipes to climb down, and ran into the street, because she could just as easily have killed me without even noticing it. I couldn't blame Sam. I'd run away too, but I had nowhere to go. I was only 7. So Mom started putting all of her parental anger onto me. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. You could say that I shouldn't have messed up, but trust me, anything could become a reason for her. My grades were bad, and it's not surprising. Instead of doing homework, I sat as quietly as I could, and I was afraid to leave the room or to make noise. As I learned from books later, I only developed survival skills, and I couldn't add anything else to them. The saddest thing was trying to keep the place clean and tidy. She expected a 7-year-old to maintain everything in a perfect order, just like in the army. Of course, I would miss some little things from time to time. I could forget to put a dirty plate in the sink, and it already was an excuse for her to get super mad. If she hated kids so much, why did she have 2 of them? The only happy days were when Sam used to take me away from home. She got herself a decent life, and she got prettier after her escape. Her husband turned out to be a nice man. He helped her with money, and she opened her own small business, a flower shop. Of course, she had to do everything and maintain the place all by herself. The money was stable, and she could rely on it. Sam looked for ways to take me away from Mom. She couldn't just steal me to live with her. Mom had connections. So Sam would have been put in jail or just beaten up again. She talked to lawyers and asked for help from her husband, but so far it had no results. In addition, her mother-in-law was not great, and they lived together. So besides working and trying to save me, she was saving money to buy her own apartment. But when we did meet, it was just amazing. She used to take me to amusement parks and gave me treats and let me do whatever I wanted. If not for these short but happy meetings, I would have definitely gone crazy from the constant tension. And in the end, she would always put a few bills in my pocket so I could buy something tasty at school. Mom didn't let us starve, but she didn't give us any pocket money either. She thought we didn't deserve to deal with money on our own. And when I was at school, I wanted so much to buy myself a new toy, a cookie, or a fancy pencil box. If not for Sam's help, I wouldn't be able to afford any little thing you can't help but want when you're a kid. Everything changed suddenly. It's bad to be happy when someone's ill, but Sam and I were on top of the world. When I was 14 years old, Mom was taken to the hospital for an emergency operation. I don't know what the problem was. Sam says it was a kind of women's operation. She added it would take a long time, and we had a chance to get in touch with some social services. Sam was allowed to take me with her as the only adult relative. We celebrated it with balloons and lemonade, and I moved into their apartment. Her husband was not against it. He worked as a sort of sea captain, so he didn't spend much time at home anyway. he could go sailing and return only after 2 months. The least pleasant thing was living with her mother-in-law. She was strict as a grandma, but after Mom, I could easily bear her hissing because it was not followed by hitting. I continued going to school. I even got better at studying, and I was praised a couple times. And Sam worked while her husband was away. By this time, she already had 3 shops and some staff. She didn't give up on her dream about the apartment, but she decided to postpone it a bit and expand the business first. Sam worked like a dog and showed up at home only to sleep and shower. I was already quite independent, so she wasn't worried about me. On the contrary, sometimes I cooked for the whole family and made her eat because she was always so weak and tired. With all of that, I have no idea how Sam managed to get pregnant and give birth to a little girl. A small, but a very loud one. I looked after her during the night so that Sam could get some rest. Sam kept on working, only now she took her daughter with her. But the mother-in-law clearly did not like what her apartment was turning into. Maybe she didn't like Sam specifically, but she couldn't get to her. I, on the other hand, was always around. She never hit me. She almost never spoke to me. This woman went further. She put a lock on the fridge and hid the key. By that time, Sam was barely ever home, so she didn't see it. I didn't want to complain, so I ate at the school cafeteria. It was not enough, though. Plus, I didn't want to disturb Sam as she was working like crazy in her business and raising a kid at the same time. Once, my sister, her husband, and their kid left for another city for almost a month. I was left alone with her mother-in-law. Sam gave me some money just in case, but I ran out of it quickly. The mother-in-law went even further. She changed the locks on the door and wouldn't let me in. I had 3 options. Returning to Mom, I hadn't spoken to her for a year already. Reaching out to Sam in the middle of her vacation, which it seemed embarrassing to do that, or living on the streets. I chose the last option. I started living in the streets. It was already spring, so I could spend nights on a park bench. At school, I told them about the water being turned off and constant repairs at the apartment to explain my appearance. I spent nights on a bench, ate from a garbage can behind the mall, and used their restrooms. It was quite bearable, except it was a bit weird and scary on the bench at night, and I had to run from the police constantly. I was accidentally seen by my classmate Max. He didn't laugh at me. He offered me to live in his garage in exchange for helping his brother in his workshop. His brother even paid me for that. I was kind of his assistant. I got so used to this life that I missed Sam's return. When she came home, she didn't find me. She talked to her mother-in-law, to which she said that I had run away from home. And it didn't surprise her, because our genetics were very poor. Naturally, after this statement, Sam packed her stuff, took her daughter, and moved to a hotel. Later, she started renting an apartment and searching for me. My classmates were interviewed by Sam and police officers, but for some reason, Max didn't tell anything. Apparently, he thought that Sam was the one who kicked me out, but he forgot to tell me that, so I lived the way I lived, worked, maintained the garage, and kept eating by the mall. That was where I met Sam, quite by accident. I didn't even notice her approach me at the trash can. The little one saw her uncle first and shouted. The next second, Sam rushed to pull me out and took me to the hospital. They found nothing and let me go. At the apartment, I told Sam how I was kicked out of the house and how I lived with Max's older brother. At first, she was furious that Max didn't confess to her, but then she understood him and even advised me to stay friends with him since he was so loyal and was not a snitch. Sam told me that she could not stand being in that family and left. Her husband got a bit upset, but understood her. Max and I are still friends, and I still work with his brother, though I don't have much time anymore. After school, I usually look after my niece. She adores me. Her first word was even uncle. Also, I gradually joined the family business. The shop officially belonged to Sam, so she took her business with her when she left that marriage. By the way, that was the reason her ex-mother-in-law wanted to sue her. She suddenly found that her beloved son didn't earn that much. The main income of the family was the flower business, but she got nothing out of it. Sam's husband had already given her the money in cash. Moreover, she fully made it up to her. Finally, her husband and his mom didn't take part in the business at all. Well, that's my story. Write in the comments whether you had the same situation and how you got out of them. Click the like button and fight no matter what, like my older sister. Because even if everyone is against you, there are always 2 ways: to give up or to do something about it.
Hey guys, my name is Natalie, and I want to share my problem with you. The thing is, my relatives don't talk to me because of my hobby. No, I don't do anything criminal. My hobby is the most peaceful of all. I just love knitting. Hooks, spokes, forks, or even just by my hands. And what I get by connecting the loops fascinates me more than a kaleidoscope and yoga together. Seems like, what could be the problem? I'll tell you. I started knitting when I was a kid. My grandma loved flipping spokes, watching her favorite series. It was a good brain workout. Plus, we wore her warm socks, vests, and scarves. She didn't knit anything big. She didn't use sketches or such things. She knitted just for herself. I really liked it, and I asked her to teach me. She laughed, but she taught me. First, I trained on simple things. My parents bought me some yarn. Mostly, it was simple and cheap. I bought knitting magazines. Seeing I was enjoying it, my mom took me to knitting classes. For some reason, these classes were affiliated with the church. No, we didn't pray there. The teacher was very talented and patient. By the way, I still keep a shawl she knitted for me as a gift. It's fine work, and it's really warm. By the time I was 16, I already had my own knitting toolbox and a small stock of high-quality yarn. Mostly, I knitted for myself, but sometimes my friends would ask me to make a trendy cowl or cardigan. They always bought the yarn and chocolates to thank me for my work. Many of them said I was so good that I should monetize it. I hesitated. If I started a knitting business, I really should spend a lot of time on it, and it's quite difficult to convince people. My relatives were unhappy, but it was okay for them. Their daughter is at home, not hanging out with bad people, not drinking or smoking. I just sat by myself in a corner, being creative. But my mom, sister, and my cousin bullied me all the time. They said knitting was only for old women, but at the same time, they never refused my gifts. They would even ask me to tie them something, but they never thanked me and didn't buy the yarn for it. My mom said we're family, and I shouldn't ask them for anything. At some point, a friend of mine got sick and tired of my procrastination. She created an Instagram page for me. She uploaded my work there. She promoted my business for a small profit share. Personally, the strangest thing for me was that it all started positively. And now, I have a lot of customers. Of course, it takes a lot of time, but it brings in a lot of money in return. Plus, I'm so happy I have a lot of customers from abroad who want to buy my products.
Coming.
I don't sell cheap. I use
Okay.
only high-quality yarn, natural wool, silk cotton, and no synthetics. I don't do anything for order.